Hello, and welcome to Season 12 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. Each week we watch the same movie on our own and then hop on a call to discuss it. This season, the theme is blatant pandering. We're going to review 10 movies that were either made in or set in the U.S. states that have downloaded the most episodes of The Horrific over the last few years. This will be a shorter season, so we may work in some listener recommendations and horror news along the way, too. Thanks for listening. All right. We got another one. We're being real consistent after a shaky start. I'm quite proud of us.
It's been a good season so far. I'm just glad we're back on track. I hate change.
Yep. Back in our rhythm, which is great. Except that this week we couldn't do the movie we wanted to do because it wasn't available to watch anywhere.
Yeah.
So this week we are doing a movie that takes place in Colorado. And our first choice was the movie Misery, but it was just not like available anywhere without a full purchase. And I didn't want to pay the full purchase price. So called an audible, looked for something that we could find on Tubi because it's just a wonderful experience. And found one called Snowbeast. Yep.
Yeah, definitely. It's actually kind of funny because after we decided that we couldn't find Misery, I looked and I actually have 2 copies of it. And I remember the reason why is because Walmart was selling them for like $3.97 or something like that. I don't know if it was last winter or whenever. And, so I have one completely unopened. So I was like, I could have just shipped that down there to him, but we'll do it one day. But, we just had to pull audible. I already, said I don't like change, but, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. So Snowbeast is probably one that most people listening have not heard of, and that's totally fine. I hadn't either. It was on a list of, best or I don't know, some list of horror movies set in Colorado that I found. And we watched it, and it was made in 1997, and it looks like a home movie from a ski trip that someone else's family went on. So
yes, it does.
Not dealing with real high budget thing, but I had fun with it. And I will do the introduction, and then you can share what you learned about this one.
Okay.
And then we will get into the mysterious physics of logs that can roll down a hill and knock over a truck, but also be easily picked up and tossed by an actress. Details.
That was the most suspenseful one yet, and I love it. I didn't know where you're going to next. It was amazing.
In 1977, NBC brought us Snowbeast, a made-for-TV creature horror film written by Joseph Stefano and directed by Herb Wallerstein. The film tells the story of a ski resort in Colorado terrorized by a Yeti-like monster that feeds on human flesh. Local law enforcement wants to blame it all on a bear so that they don't have to cancel the annual snow carnival, but a small band of heroes are determined to find the truth and stop the real killer. Will they succeed? Only one way to find out. Watch this movie for free on Tubi.
I love it.
What did you learn about this movie?
So, not a whole lot. One reason is because I just didn't put a ton of effort into it. But in the remake for this, which is called Snowbeast, but it's spaced Snow Space Beast, which I think is interesting. They used the same costume, and the remake came out.
Really?
And I guess it was a part 2. It was the Snowbeast Returns, but it had the same costume too. So 2011, they used that same costume for it.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's what I'm gonna keep it at. It's about Bigfoot. I could have added some Bigfoot facts, but I just didn't.
Well, all right then.
Yeah. I mean, this is definitely one of those movies you just gotta embrace.
Yeah, right. It was a very, very low budget affair. I couldn't find any information on how much was spent on it or anything, but it's obvious when you're watching it. Like, it really reminded me of like a soap opera or like an episode of Matlock. Mm-hmm. Like that was that was kind of the same quality of filmmaking. had kind of the overly dramatic kind of stock music.
Right.
But one thing I was pretty impressed by was the audio quality. Because I would expect, like, we have watched way higher budget movies where it's way harder to hear what everyone's saying. Mm-hmm. But I thought this one, somehow, they actually just, like, nailed that and everything was really clear.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, so when I initially started watching this, I don't remember what day, the wife and kid was asleep. And so I ended up, like, I wasn't watching it very loud. And so I was struggling with it because wanting to keep them up. So the next day they had, I started work at 10 a.m. and they were at work, or they had already left for work and daycare. So I watched it like full volume and I couldn't agree more after that. When it was low volume, I was like, I can't understand. I don't know what the hell there's like, it was normal for what I watch TV at during that time, but yeah, once I did that, it was pretty good.
Yeah, and I was worried about it because subtitles weren't available.
Yeah.
And typically with the lower budget movies, I can't make out like half of what's going on. But this one I was pleasantly surprised by. So.
Yeah.
One thing that was not as pleasant, though, was I noticed it seemed like the different cameras they used had like a totally different color. Mm-hmm. Like some had like a super blue shaded or kind of red toned or normal. So it seemed like it was made, like if you've ever tried to splice together video that was shot from like a cell phone and like an actual camera.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, oops.
Yeah.
This is real obvious where they're switching. I felt like this one had a little bit of that too.
Yeah. It made me wonder, like, did part of the budget go to a really nice camera and then a really smaller budget go to a lesser? Yeah, definitely noticed that as well. I think the best way to put it is how you already put this film, where it was like, almost like a soap opera. Like just the quality and all of that, like that. I didn't even connect the dots until you said that. And when you did, I was like, yes, that's exactly the case here.
Yeah. Well, and it helps too that it was like a made for TV movie by NBC in the 70s. You know what I mean? Like they kind of had their style at that point. So it all makes sense in that context.
Yeah.
But one thing I kind of wanted to talk about with this is, I feel like if you and I made a horror movie, it would probably end up a lot like this, where it's like, oh, we have some budget. Yeah, we're going to the mountains. It's very important that this movie be in the mountains in the snow because that's where we want to go. And then, okay, cool. Now that we're here, how can we, figure out how to be like a low budget way to build suspense and stuff. And so I think they did a lot of smart things as far as, like the camera shots of the ladies skiing, where it's like something is behind the trees watching them. Like they did a lot of stuff from the monster's perspective, but from like an obscured location, and then having music that gave it sort of an ominous feel. And really that takes no effort or budget other than just like walking your camera to behind a tree. But it also kind of helps like build that feeling of something ominous or scary that is observing and waiting to attack. And I think that's a kind of an effective tactic in horror movies, especially when you have creature horror with not a big budget, because that's a way to involve the creature a lot and keep it as like part of the story, but not ruin the moment by showing a terrible costume.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's definitely like, that has to be, if you're, I was going to say low budget horror maker, but like any horror maker, like that's definitely, I don't want to say a cheap way, but like helps you. One of my favorite ways favorite things they do in filming, they try to put you in the place of whoever is in the film. Yeah. And even if that means like in Halloween, when you are seeing through like Michael Myers' eyes, it just puts you in that place. So I like that, adds intensity, and you don't have to see the villain so early to make you, because I always have the theory that once you see them, it lessens the intensity of the film.
Yeah, your imagination will always make them worse than what the visuals of the film can pull off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I noticed with this one, kind of in that same vein, was like there was a scene when they find the murdered woman's body in the barn, and you only see like her hand with like the blood on it, but then the reactions of the other people are like what sell the gore. So even instead of trying to pull off like realistic looking gore, they really kind of went like light with it and left it up to your imagination and relied on like the way that people, the way that like other people reacted was your only signal to know how to react, which is kind of smart, I think, for this exactly the same reason, right? Like your imagination will always make like that grisly scene in the barn worse than what they would have been able to pull off.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point. Yeah, just like a different kind of perspective on that. Didn't even think about that either. I think that it could be good and bad, though, in those situations, depending on how the actual reaction is to it. Mm-hmm. You know, I feel like in some films they might like overdo it, and to the point where you're just like, oh my god, like chill, like
yeah, no, that's a good point.
But for the most part, it gets the point over what you're trying to accomplish, and that's trying not to be censored out from not being able to put the film out unless it's X-rated, because if you have too much blood and gore, they're going to censor it. So I can see that, especially if it's a made-for-TV movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and I guess I didn't really think about that, too, but I would imagine what you can show on TV has always been, or on, like, network TV, has always been pretty scaled down from what you can show in a theater. So to make a horror movie specifically for that, I guess adds some additional challenge. But,
right, yeah.
On a lighter note, I had in my notes that all of the haircuts in this movie could be from 1970s America or 1170s England.
That's great, man.
It's very medieval.
Yeah, it definitely, there were definitely some squire cuts there.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah.
I just liked how, so it had Alice McEnroe in it, and she was, in the movie Beetlejuice. She was their personal, I don't remember what her title was, but it was like their personal, like, help for becoming, or like once you're dead, like she was going to help you through like the process of becoming dead or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's about as much good as I have to say on this one.
Yeah.
Oh, other than there was one scene where they synced up like the people clicking in their ski boots to the beat of the music.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like, I assume that was intentional, but I was not expecting it when it happened, and it just kind of stood out to me. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a nice creative flair to throw into this. But then there was a lot of Coors Heavy Rough stuff going on in this movie too.
Yeah.
Largely because it was real low budget, and because,
made for TV, low budget. I mean, it just like hit all the points.
Yeah, there were some scenes that didn't exactly land well, and probably the most egregious was the one that I mentioned in the setup for the intro, which is where, so they've got like a camper in the woods,
mm-hmm.
and the creature erects it by pulling a ski rack off the back. So he really got them. But anyway, later, like that was a really long scene for
right.
Exactly. But then later he's up on the side of the hill and he pushes these logs down, and they come and it's this super dramatic scene of just these big fake logs rolling down the side of a hill, and then they knock over the camper and it like kills the guy inside or something.
Mm-hmm.
Or he's injured, and then the creature finishes them off or whatever. But anyway, the point is these logs are supposed to be big and heavy enough to have tipped over an entire camper. But then when they're trying to get the guy out, all the actors are just like picking him up and tossing him around like they're Lincoln Logs. So I'm just it was just the most ridiculous thing. But also, like they were rolling down the hill and hit the thing side on, but then once it was like knocked over, they were like wedged in through the windshield, and just like like the physics made no sense whatsoever. And I feel like that was a very, very unnecessary distraction. Like, we talk a lot about how special effects don't have to be good. They just have to be not distracting to what the movie's trying to do. And there were a couple times in this one where it was just distractingly bad. Yeah.
I mean, I think a good way to kind of add to this is like, there was a scene where two of the guys, I think it was Gar and Tony, were promising not to tell anyone about what's going on until they know for sure what's happening with with Bigfoot. And they said so it went even Ellen, and he said especially Ellen, and Gar said, why, basically, and he said, because she's a news person. I swear to God, the words out of his mouth was because she's a news person. And I was like, yes, I understand exactly. So I thought what my immediate thought when I heard that line was, first off, I need to write this down because I don't want to forget it. And second off, this is the equivalent of what it would be like if you and I made a movie and I said, hey, take care of the video and audio, and I'll do the writing for the dialogue. It's like, it reminds me kind of like of Charlie Day from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia writing. It's like, you mean like reporter?
Right.
The words were news person. So, yeah. It was definitely, like I was saying, part of this, one of the reasons why I'll also give it a pass is because, like, sometimes I feel like you can have movies that are so bad that you're just like, oh, this is okay. Like The Room is an example of that terrible movie, but like I've watched it, it's so bad, but I feel like, sometimes they can get passed, but I feel like this one can especially get a pass because we are in October and we are, in our Halloween month. And this is our time to just watch, any of them and all of them. So, it definitely probably got a pass for us. But the thing that confused me, I think, the most about the film is, for some reason, they dropped it in April 28th, 1977 was when this, was released. And it's like, you would have had a really good chance in October.
Yeah. But I agree with you. And this one feels, it's kind of like that campy old monster movie. Yeah. So it's got that charm to it where, this is not high budget. This is not going for realism whatsoever. It's just trying to create like a scary scenario. And it was fine for that. It is definitely one worth putting on in the background. It's not one I would highly recommend over other things in the same genre,
Yeah, there's definitely better ways to spend your time of October with horror films. But hey,
and if you need a new one, I mean, try it out. There's worse choices too.
Yeah, so. Definitely worse choices out there. This one not too bad, and it's not super long either. So that's a good benefit to it as well.
I was a little disappointed, though, because I was kind of hoping they would just never show the monster's face.
Yeah.
But at least they made it kind of out of focus when they did. It wasn't like a super close-up, detailed view.
Yeah.
But the costume was rough. And
that makes a lot of sense, yeah.
I feel like they would have been better off not ever having a direct shot of it.
Yeah. But. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I was thinking to myself, that's why I mentioned the fact of how they use the same costume, because I was at the point where I was like, that's upgrade. It was so bad. They had so many years between the first and second, but it was interesting.
Yeah. So as far as subgenre of this one, it is definitely a monster horror. I think that really it was trying to prey on it's unknown in that you're not sure what it's capable of. So with a bear attacking, that's scary, but it's a known quantity. Mm-hmm. Whereas with this thing kind of having it be that sort of, what do they call it?
Menage a trois.
At the mountain, the ski brothel.
Mm-hmm.
Having it be like an unknown or sort of like legendary creature, like a Bigfoot or a Yeti, added that like extra element of how smart is this thing? You know, it seems like can set traps for us, which makes it way more dangerous just because of like the intelligence level and stuff like that. So
I think they were trying to accomplish that too, just like with the scene where I think it was Ellen and Tony, I don't know who was in the cabin, and like the Yeti was trying to get through the door, and then they ran to the window to get out, and so it ran to the other side to get them from there, and then they had to try to get out the door so like it definitely makes sense, like it was smarter than what, you know, and trying to trick them in, or knowing what they're trying to do, you know, and I think that's a benefit that you can add to a creature that no one can confirm if it's real or not. You know, that definitely adds, like you were saying, it's not like a bear that you know what to do with. So it gives you
room to be creative with the horror and to create kind of new scenarios and stuff. So
at least they gave it a shot, you know.
I also had a section in my notes that was making fun of this movie because it kind of like so I had it that they were freaking out trying to like minimize the creature attacks because they had their snow festival or whatever coming up, and they didn't want to have to cancel it, or they didn't want people to not come. And I said, pretty creative, since that is a completely original plot line and not basically exactly what was in Jaws. Yeah. And I was really proud of that point until I read Wikipedia and realized that like literally everyone who wrote a review of this movie just made exactly the same point about it.
Right. Yeah.
So I was not the only one to pick up on that. And that was sort of the majority of the criticism that I read. So
yeah, I feel like that's like not just a horror quip either. It's like there's so many like, well, there's a terrorist. Well, the event must go on, or the festival needs to go on, or whatever the case. You know, I do kind of think
that was basically even the plot of Threat Level Midnight. Think about it.
That's actually a good point. That's a good point. Yeah,
Golden Face.
Yeah. But I do think I feel like it was almost like there's like almost like a lack of imagination in making part of this film too, and I'm basing that off the fact of like when you look at the footprints of this Yeti, because you know I'm gonna be a mountain man, so I know tracking. That's what I do. Anyway, it definitely looked like a hand that they just put in the snow and just kind of like slid back. Like a human hand almost. And I was kind of thinking like, well, that's kind of like bad lack of imagination. Cause like, I feel like even with paper mache, you can make, you know, if you're just making snow prints to what the Yeti's feet should look like, you know, you can just make like a paper mache monster foot and use that to press into the snow. You know, it just seemed like a couple like lost opportunities. You're just like, come on, man. Like, it wouldn't have cost $20, you know, even in the 70s to get this done. Like you could have really done it. So I feel like that's part of the thing, where it's just like a little imagination piece of like let's try to add some better, you know, the small things, you know.
Yeah. But I don't know. I kind of enjoyed it just from that sort of nostalgic, campy point of view. Like it was a fine movie to have on in the background. It's one where if you're paying a lot of attention to it, you'll find lots of things to not like. Yeah. But as background noise, it was a fine way for a horror fan to spend an hour.
Yeah. This is definitely like a jackalope horror film.
Yes.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.